Alright, guys, we're in Genesis chapter 47, another chapter in Genesis. We're going to get right into it. The header reads, Jacob blesses Pharaoh, which is super interesting, but we'll get into it. Then Joseph went to see Pharaoh, and told him, My father and my brothers have arrived from the land of Canaan. They have come with all their flocks and herds and possessions, and they are now in the region of Goshen. Joseph took 5 of his brothers with him and presented them to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh asked the brothers, What is your occupation? They replied, We, your servants, are shepherds, just like our ancestors. We have come to live here in Egypt, for a while, for there is no pasture for our flocks in Canaan. The famine is very severe there. So please, we request permission to live in the region of Goshen. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, Now that your father and brothers have joined you here, choose any place in the entire land of Egypt for them to live. Give them the best land of Egypt. Let them live in the region of Goshen, and if any of them have special skills, put them in charge of my livestock too. Then Joseph brought in his father, Jacob, and presented him to Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. How old are you? Pharaoh asked him. Jacob replied, I have traveled this earth for 130 hard years, but my life has been short compared to the lives of my ancestors. Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh again before leaving his court. So Joseph assigned the best land of Egypt, the regions of Ramses, to his father and his brothers, and he settled them there, just as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph provided food for his father and his brothers in amounts appropriate to the number of their dependents, including the smallest children. Joseph's leadership in the famine. Meanwhile, the famine became so severe that all the food was used up, and people were starving throughout the land of Egypt and Canaan. By selling grain to the people, Joseph eventually collected all the money in Egypt and Canaan, and he put the money in Pharaoh's treasury. When the people of Egypt and Canaan ran out of money, all the Egyptians came to Joseph. Our money is gone, they cried, but please give us food, or we will die before your very eyes. Joseph replied, Since your money is gone, bring me your livestock. I will give you food in exchange for your livestock. So they brought their livestock to Joseph in exchange for food. In exchange for their horses, flocks of sheep and goats, herds of cattle, and donkeys, Joseph provided them with food for another year. But that year ended, and the next year they came again and said, We cannot hide the truth from you, my lord. Our money is gone, and all our livestock and cattle are yours. We have nothing left to give but our bodies and our land. Why should we die before your very eyes? Buy us and our land in exchange for food. We offer our land and ourselves as slaves for Pharaoh. Just give us grain so we may live and not die, and so the land does not become empty and desolate. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. All the Egyptians sold him their fields because the famine was so severe. And soon all the land belonged to Pharaoh. As for the people, he made them all slaves, from one end of Egypt to the other. The only land he did not buy was the land belonging to the priests. They received an allotment of food directly from Pharaoh, so they didn't need to sell their land. Then Joseph said to the people, Look, today I have bought you and your land for Pharaoh. I will provide you with seed so you can plant the fields. Then, when you harvest it, 1/5 of your crop will belong to Pharaoh. You may keep the remaining 4/5 as seed for your fields and as food for you, your households, and your little ones. You have saved our lives, they exclaimed. May it please you, my lord, to let us be Pharaoh's servants. Joseph then issued a decree, still in effect in the land of Egypt, that Pharaoh should receive 1/5 of all the crops grown in his land. Only the land belonging to the priests was not given to Pharaoh. Jacob and Joseph die in Egypt. Meanwhile, the people of Israel settled in the region of Goshen in Egypt. There they acquired property, and they were fruitful, and their population grew rapidly. Jacob lived for 70 years after his arrival in Egypt, so he lived 147 years in total. 17, not 70, I'm sorry. Jacob lived for 17 years after his arrival in Egypt, so he lived 147 years in all. As the time of his death drew near, Jacob called for his son Joseph and said to him, Please do me this favor. Put your hand under my thigh and swear that you will treat me with unfailing love by honoring this last request. Do not bury me in Egypt. When I die, please take my body out of Egypt and bury me with my ancestors." So Joseph promised, "I will do as you ask." "Swear that you will do it," Jacob insisted. So Joseph gave his oath, and Jacob bowed humbly at the head of his bed. And that's the end of chapter 47, guys. So, I'm not going to lie. It is interesting to me that Jacob would choose to bless Pharaoh. Not so much that what had been happening to him and his sons wasn't worthy of a blessing, because obviously they had been very instrumental in the survival of the family, put him in a place, Joseph as a place of favor that allowed him to extend his power and his authority to help bless his entire family. But seeing how Pharaoh treated people, and the vast amounts of slaves, and I know slave isn't necessarily a detrimental word in the Bible, because it's just more of a relationship status, I guess, is the more appropriate way, because we have a lot of connotation that we put on slavery, and rightfully so. Our history, especially as Americans, is not a very proud moment in our history as how slaves were treated, but I imagine that was the case in Egypt as well. So it confuses me with the willingness of Jacob to bestow blood, because he didn't have to go give Pharaoh a blessing, he chose to. And so that interests me, especially because he knows that Egyptians still loathe his people. In fact, even as early as just a couple of months ago, or maybe just a year or two ago, uncertain of the specificity of the timeline, when his brothers showed up and the Egyptians wouldn't sit at the table of his brothers because they were Hebrews, or they were shepherds, and they were just thought as lesser. And so, I don't know, maybe that's just to help us better explain or understand just how gracious God is. And those that follow him say, hey, no, Pharaoh did right by my son, did right by my family. I want to bless him. He's not my enemy. No, nor do I want anyone to be my enemy. It's just really their relationship with God. If you're not in a relationship with God, you could find yourself an enemy of me. And so, with that not being the case, Jacob chose to love and appreciate and respect. And so, it surprises me further, simply because I know what plays out for the rest of Genesis and Exodus, as far as the next 400 years after these blessings from Jacob and the service from Joseph, and what that means as far as, the next king after the current king of Egypt, who had showed favor to Joseph. I mean, this is the beginning of 400 years of bondage for his people. And so it's super interesting to see how it started off by just Pharaoh simply welcoming a family that would just explode in population, and end up being hundreds of thousands and millions of people. And so, I don't know, and for it to be this story to, the story is almost the same as Joseph's, that these people were promised to be numerous and promised all these great things if they would just simply align with God and serve. But they're going to spend their time in prison and in slavery and in deserts, and a lot of it's through simple lack of faith and not following God and not truly believing him. But even when they did, God needed them to serve that time, to see that he's God, to see that he's the one to follow. And we get more of that when we get into Exodus, but it's still super interesting that Jacob blessed Pharaoh, and really what ended up being Pharaoh's favor and his power, he ended up using. And maybe not specifically the one that he blessed, but his predecessors would be, not predecessors, his, what's the word I'm looking for? The kings that would follow him would be the ones that would really be tyrants over the Israelites. And so that always intrigued me, seeing how things fell through for Jacob and Joseph and how Jacob blessed Pharaoh and what that ended up turning into. But on that note, I'll go ahead and let that go. I only got about 2 or 3 more chapters in Genesis. I think it's Genesis 50 where it ends. Tomorrow I'll read chapter 48 where the header reads Jacob blesses Manasseh and Ephraim. And on that note, have a good night. God bless. I'll see you guys tomorrow for the next chapter. Have a good night.